So I've got my raid shirt on because the raid is complete. Our final big goal of Season of Discovery Season 2 is concluded, and what a battle it was. I actually set aside 2 hours to go and do the raid, considering like the animal boss, the mechanical animal boss was a little tough. That was definitely questionable. I was like, okay, they're probably going to turn up the ante for the last boss, or we're going to have like a Black Fathom Deeps approach, where the last boss is kind of meh compared to the second to last boss. But Blizzard usually self-corrects these kind of things. It's like, oh, okay, the last boss is kind of disappointing. Let's up the ante. This turned into a learning fiesta, and good God, does this boss hit hard, which is not great when you're doing undergeared progress and you're the tank, because a lot of pressure falls to you and your co-tank, and you're like, I think the healers hate me right now. I really do. I think the healers actually hate me, but I guess this is a good point for people who are like worried about tanking. Thankfully, I do have like, 20 years experience tanking pretty much. How do you cope with this? Well, you utilize every resource in the toolkit. That's what you do. You have to start digging deep into abandoning conventional wisdom, because conventional wisdom, which you'll get from guides and stuff, is really, really good if you're somebody who is doing tons of preparation before you get into raiding. Like, you're getting every scrap of armor, item, reputation, whatever it might be, before you take steps into raiding. And for a lot of you listening to this who have been a part of my community for a while, you'll probably think, why would anybody do that? And you're right, I'm in that camp as well. It's like, I don't see the point, because you can completely outplay in most games difficulty. The better you play, the less difficulty the game is. And this has been a big problem for Blizzard for a long time, and why now in retail, everything murders you really quickly once you reach to the mythic level, because these guys tend to not take the extra incidental damage that they shouldn't take. Therefore, the healing requirements of the healers at the higher level is less than what it is at the lower levels. Which makes no sense, right? It's counterintuitive, but it is the nature of the game. When people play worse, they take more damage, they do less damage, etc., etc., etc. And the fights are longer, they're more difficult, and so on and so forth. Thermoplug. Let's talk about the boss first of all before we get into anything. This fight is really long, and we didn't know. Remember, we're raiding blind. None of us had any idea what this boss does, and even the people who came in who had done some Noma before us had not done this boss, and I think there was one guy who had done this boss, but as it turned out, after we killed it, and they obviously never ever just tried to suggest anything, and I truly appreciate that. They just kept their mouth shut and kept playing and followed our strategy building. Just said that, yeah, this is not how I did it. We did it in a very different way, with, differently geared and different comps, and a much more, I hate to use the word sweaty because it's so prevalent these days, but a much more min-maxed comp that accomplishes what this boss requires. So the basics were pretty obvious. Spawns bombs, and clicking them deactivates the bomb spawners, and the bombs, thankfully, had very little HP. I think this was a lovely touch by Blizzard, is that essentially one hit would kill them, and that enabled us to do some cool things. The next thing we noticed is just how goddamn hard this boss hits. So I was tanking. I stayed as arms because it made sense to me to not go full defense out of the wazoo, because one, that's not the conventional wisdom of Classic, and two, everything we've seen so far that really hurts can be outplayed with using shield wall or something like that to block it, or to off tank it in some way with a co-tank. We've got around everything, and I honestly felt very useless in some encounters. In our first clear, certainly the first 5 bosses or whatever, being prop. It just didn't make any sense. So I came in that way with the idea that I will go and change to Fury later on if it's necessary. Because if the primary tank, which is a prop paladin, can do all the threat, then I could just steal that threat, and it's not a big deal. Well, didn't work out that way. So this is, as we now know, this is a 4-phase fight, and it's really long. And interestingly enough, as a warrior, you get extra punished here. I was taught, we had me as a warrior and Shrimpsy as another warrior, and we just noticed, we don't do any damage to this boss, and it's weird, even with Wind Fury in our group. Why is that? So I now know that this boss has significantly more armor. I think it's like multiples the armor of Ragnaros. That's devastating to DPS warriors because you just don't do any damage, therefore you don't get any rage, so you don't get any rage to do abilities that do more damage. Like, it's a double whammy of getting absolutely screwed on the way this boss is designed. It just has enormous amounts of armor. So even with Wind Fury, I was like, I'm not getting any rage. Like, it's so weird. Like, and I was talking about it with the other group. It's like, it feels like I'm immune to Wind Fury or something, because I'm just not getting those big bursts of rage that you expect as a warrior with Wind Fury. Is suddenly you go from like 5 rage to like 70. And if you have the option to like spam hamstring in between and just blow rage to proc more Wind Fury to get more rage. And here you just didn't have any rage to do anything. So I was very, very like, what is going on here? This is weird, like super weird. And Shrimpsy felt it too. And I was like, dude, I did like no damage there. I don't know what's going on. And it's like, okay, we found out like, yeah, this boss has just massive armor. Okay, but that's the nature of the beast. I'm not going to complain about it. It's just something we noticed. First trouble we had is, wow, our tanks are dying immediately. And I felt really bad for our healers. I was like, what could I do here? And the big problem was phase 1 just puts out so much magical damage onto the tank. It's all fire-based. So it's like, okay, do we use fire resist aura? Do we need to go and get fire potions, which are gratuitously expensive, in order to survive this? And my raid brain kicked in. If we're taking so much damage, and this I'm going to talk a bit through how progress should work in your brain, if you do get to raid blind, is that if we're taking insurmountable amounts of damage, like looking at the details damage meter, damage taken meter, it's like we were like taking thousands and thousands of damage. You're doing something wrong. Right? That's generally my first go-to before I relent and like, okay, we just have to heal through this, is if we're taking massive, massive amounts of damage, like it's just ridiculous to the point where the healers can't keep up. My instinct is not we need more healers or we need more tanks. It's that we're doing something wrong. And I'm going to try different things to get around the problem before we start making changes. So the first thing that we dealt with was the breath. The breath was just like stacking so much of the fire dot. And it's like, okay, what can we do about this breath? So the first question was, can we taunt swap the breath? Blizzard, you tricky, tricky little rats, have put in a mechanic that if you taunt during the breaths, because the idea was something we would do in retail very regularly, is one tank would take like half the mechanic or the first part of the mechanic, and then the other tank taunts midway and takes the other half or the second piece of the mechanic. And therefore you divide the damage up. If you taunt during that breath, it will actually choose the third or fourth person on the threat meter to chase. In which case it's always going to be like a melee or a ranged and breathe all over the raid. I've never seen that before. I'd be curious, and I need to talk to Mirez. Has he ever seen this happen? Where they intentionally make it so if you taunt during this mechanic, it will choose somebody else on the threat meter. It was really bizarre, like, to be like, what the hell is going on? Like, it didn't matter if I taunted, the other person taunted. It would chase a rogue, or it would chase a mage, and be like, what? What is going on here? It was so weird. But either way, that's not an option, right? That's not an option. That's not the way it can go. So it's like, okay, what else can we do? Can we move the boss? Well, or is the boss stationary during this? No, he keeps walking. Can we outrange it? Because he has a wind-up time. All right, let's try that. And that worked. You could do it without taking any of the stacks. So that cut out like 12 or 13 stacks of this fire dot is just running. Then the next question comes. How do we kite this in an appropriate way for the melee? Because he also does this massive punch at the end, which is like a frontal, or it's just circled around the tank. And you don't want the melee to get hit by it because the tanks are going to take still a ton of damage. So you don't want any of the DPS to take any damage. You want the healers to be able to focus entirely on the tanks, right? So now the kite path needs to be sorted. And we did like 4 or 5 different kite paths. But you have to min-max as well. We need to get out of this phase because we figured out after a couple of scuff pulls, it's like, oh, at 50% the phase changes to something else. So we only need to get to 50%, right? Okay, so how do we do this in a different way? And I came up with a number of different kite paths. Like, I personally liked just circling around the bottom, but that made it a little difficult for the people clicking the buttons at the far end to stay in range, but it should be temporary, because what I wanted to do was horseshoe it, so that I could kite the boss and then come back. And I even mixed some intervene into this to make it nicer, so I could like go one way and then quickly shoot to the other side and then come back, which was okay. That worked out all right. Ultimately, we kind of settled on just muddling through as best you can. Don't take the damage. But then my brain started to change my approach to this, because the next phase was the frost phase. And it could be dispelled off the main tank. Okay, the frost debuff, which means we don't really need to tank swap here, and you can keep the boss stationary, which gives it in the right position for everybody to zerg it. And then because we had a prop paladin, we very quickly hit the third phase, which was the toxic phase, and that can be dispelled by the prop paladin as well, because it applies a stacking debuff of disease damage taken, but the prop paladin can dispel that as well, and there's no kiting required, which then means that the boss can be stationary and zerged again. Okay, and then it came down to managing the bombs, and our bomb team was doing really well. At that point, my brain was like, I'm useless again, because I do the least threat, for sure. I had to, at this point, we were like getting so hammered, even without the fire damage, that both me and the paladin went full protection. That armor buff, a slightly more defense, because we don't have the defense cap, all those and having last stand, slightly better, slightly longer block, although the block talent is garbage, but more threat as well, was really, really useful, is like to do these things. But now, instead of being like arms and being able to swap to my two-hander, we're still struggling. And on occasion, the tank still died. So I was like, I think I go DPS and become a debuff machine. That was my primary role. So my goal is Sunders, Demoralizing Shout, and Thunderclap. Just keep those on the boss, because anything that reduces the damage of the boss is insurmountably a good idea, because this boss absolutely wrecks. Even without all the damage buffs, his straight melee was hitting for 700, which in a world where you have 2.5k HP, and heals take a long time to land in Classic, that's a lot of damage. So it was really rough. I then went prop, because what would happen is, even with best intentions, a couple of nasty swings, then the pally would die, and therefore I would have to take over, and being prop was just better there. Or, like, so the kiting path would go wrong, we need to do a tank swap anyway, so it made sense. But then when we got a good pull, I felt useless again. We had the strategy, though, and we'd never seen past phase 3. And my gut feeling was this fight ends at phase 3. But the fact that it finishes at 50% means there's probably another phase. So I was like, okay, I think we're going to get a phase 4 here. Which, through all instincts, is it's probably all of the things mixed together. That's a classic Blizzard maneuver, is you fight all the individuals, and then you fight them all mixed together. Hopefully, I was really hoping it wasn't like 2 robots or 3 robots. That would have been really bad. So we got to work on this, and we were there for about 3 hours. This was a tough fight to muddle out and get right, and the sheer output required of certainly the healing team and the DPS to maintain focus, and just hoping and praying. There were so many times fighting this, I was just sitting on like 10% HP, and I was like, Jesus, take the wheel. At this point, there's nothing else I can do. I've put on runes to slow down his attacks, like I use Furious Thunder runes, which I don't think I've ever recommended, but like this is a good idea. An extra 6% delayed melee attack speed on this boss is huge. Doing that was a really big deal. So we mixed all these things together. On the actual pull, it was kind of fun. So on the first one, I did help tank. I was going second because of threat issues, just to make sure the threat was as good as it could be for the DPSs. Because, like I said, I think this is a one-tank fight probably going forward, like with slightly more gear upgrades, because the quicker you get out of the phases, the just less damage you have to deal with. You can reduce your damage quite a lot. You've just got to be able to survive the melees. So I think going forward, this is a one-tank fight. Phase 1 worked together really good. Then phase 2 and 3, I was like getting really frustrated. This is on the kill. I'm getting really frustrated because there ain't much I could do. One, I'm barely generating rage because of the armor. And I'm struggling to just keep up Sunders, keep up Demo Shout, and keep up Thunderclap so our DPS warrior can just zerg, zerg, zerg. And then it got to phase 4. We actually transitioned it. And I was like, okay, we're going into phase 4. Everyone stay cool. We don't know what it's going to be. It's probably something with the bombs. Stay on bomb duty. And we got started. And about 10 seconds in, I noticed his health was melting away. Like, the HP in the final phase was probably the same as 100 to 50, but spread out from 100 to 0. So he was dying really quickly. So I was like, okay, everybody just do your jobs. He is mixing all the mechanics together. That's fine. We've dealt with them all. Just make sure the bombs don't become a problem, because they're going to be intermingling. We're going to have frost patches, which can freeze people. We're going to have toxic patches and fire patches. Just keep doing the bombs and stay settled while we just keep the boss doing as little damage as possible. Healers still had some mana. And then right about 50%, our main tank died. I was there. Finally, my prots kicked in because I taunted immediately, got him into position, and then it was like, okay, I have good cooldowns here. This is fine. So as soon as he started pummeling me, and I dread to like 20%, I was like, right, last stand out the back of this. This bought us some time. A second, and this totally, for me, was a nostalgia trip, because it harkened back to how we raided in the Burning Crusade, and specifically in Sunwell, where you chained your cooldowns really back to back. So it was like, last stand falls off. Hold for a sec. See when you're getting to like 50%, and then you shield wall off the back of that. And all the time, the health is just going down and down and down. And then it got to like 10% as my cooldowns ran out. I was like, guys, I've given it everything I possibly have here. Kill the goddamn boss. And thankfully, Saints be praised, this was the first time he started casting Furnace, which is the kite ability. I was so happy because I don't take damage during that phase. I was like, we're kiting. And I was like running around. I was like, we're good. We're totally good. He doesn't hurt me during this mechanic. It's so fine. I can run and do the thing as we brought him down. And I have to say, what a great boss. What an absolutely great boss. Like, it's got some quirks. The armor thing is very annoying, certainly as a warrior. But ultimately, I really like this. It was an epic encounter. A really nice epic encounter. And I'm so, so glad. And I'm really happy to see that the team as a whole was so happy to do it blind. Like, they were so happy to, like, work through this. And the good feedback we got is, like, I now understand more of these fights than I've probably ever understood a fight in the past, because you read a guide, you generally take away from it, like, tips for DPS, tips for tanks. You get your piece of the puzzle, whereas when you blind prog, everybody's talking amongst each other. Like, there was lots of ideas of, like, maybe we ignore a bit of the bombs because they're so easy to kill, so we can put more damage elsewhere, or we don't need to rush too much to get back to click because we had to do a buddy system. Maybe we change the buddy system around a little bit because like our feral druid is struggling to get here, but now we're out of range with the kiting path. So which kiting path do you guys prefer? Like working backwards and forwards to solve all the pieces of the puzzle. And we only missed out, I think, we didn't miss out on any of the mechanics of this fight, I don't think. I think we sussed them all out on this one. And it came to a great conclusion. I also think, that on Wednesday when it resets, I think we clear this place in like, probably, my guess is one shot everything up until the last boss and probably a couple of wipes on the last boss. Purely due to like, what gear did we get that week and are the tanks sustainable to survive the melees. Because I would really like to do the one tank strat and just smash this boss. Just absolutely crush him into the floor, because I think that's where this boss is going. It might not be this reset, but certainly by next reset for our team, who's just done their first clear. But massive shout-outs to the guys, and a really nice conclusion to what will be our daily content on SOD. That's mean I'm not done with Season of Discovery, in fact, played last night, but I'm done in terms of like stream content and sort of things to learn. I'm going to put together like a bigger overall thoughts, which will probably be over on the main channel, but for now, that's where we're at. Raid's done. I still haven't done STV, but it is petering down. There isn't that great rewards for me from there. My goal with SOD now is just to finish. I want to gear up this character so he's primo for Season 3. I want to have some gold in reserve, and I want to finish my professions now, because like I said yesterday, you can do it in these chunks, and then you can relax on it a little bit. It's not hard to do like a little bit of herbalism, a little bit of alchemy. That bit can be just done and dusted, so I'm going to get that stuff done so that I'm not stressed when we get to like, I'm thinking of like Phase 4. Yeah, Phase 4, where like getting the epic mount, because you get so much gold now from doing a few quests that logging in for an hour whenever you have some free time and doing a few quests is going to tick you up to several hundred gold relatively quickly, and then you can do the same again in Phase 3, and you should have more than 1,000 gold before Phase 4 even launches. So that would make me really comfy, really happy, and I've got to be honest, I'm really enjoying doing a little bit of prog raiding and WoW without the stress of it being like weeks and weeks of mythic progress. And now with this well-designed raid, which is like, learn it and you can farm it, we should be Gucci. So that's my plan. So for daily up content, that's it. I'm really happy with what Blizzard has done with this Season of Discovery stuff. The TLDR, my overall thoughts, is the only thing letting this down is the classic leveling experience. We just did classic. We've done classic TBC. We've done classic Wrath of the Lich King. We've done classic hardcore. It's just, at least from my perspective, that classic leveling experience, again, is just not fun and really takes the shine off SOD, because the really fun stuff is getting the new runes, it's doing the raiding, it's doing the new events, it's all that kind of stuff is the really fun, interesting part. the first few days of sitting in Scarlet Monastery or trying to claim quest mobs amongst the hundreds and thousands of people that are playing SOD is just not fun and really took the shine off it for the start. It gets good at the end, but goddamn, that beginning bit is rubbish. And now it's a meta. 40 to 50 is the next Zerg. I am personally preparing for dungeon spam day one. Like, right now, my thoughts are I'm just going to have a bunch of quests to turn in the second season 3 launches to try and get a level or a level and a bit without even doing anything, because I can bank all the quests. And then probably sit in Zul'Farrak and get level 50 out of the way so I can actually enjoy it. And that's not a good feeling, but it is what makes the most sense. All right, so for SOD, I'm out for now. Bye, guys.